Welcome to Off Panel. Yo everybody, welcome to Off Panel. I'm your host, David Harper, and this week's guest is the artist of comics like Star-Lord, Captain Marvel, and the current volume of Runaways with writer Rainbow Rowell. It's Kris Anka. Thanks for coming on, Kris.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
So, we're gonna talk about Runaways a fair bit later on, but I wanted to start in a place I often like to begin with when first-time guests come on. I want to talk about your path to comics and the things that kind of influence you along the way. So, to start with, at what point in your life did you first get interested in comics, and what were the comics and characters that roped you in?
Are we talking about reading comics or wanting to draw comics?
Maybe both. I mean, I imagine to a certain degree.
Those are very different. Those are very different answers.
All right, let's hear both then.
Well, reading comics, I'd always been a fan from like fourth grade, I think. The first comic I'd ever really dived into. My parents picked it up to buy for one of my friend's birthday parties. So it was like a gift to him, but they did the shopping because I guess I was too young to go out, or I just wasn't with them. So they picked the gift, and it was this. I believe it was a Spider-Man comic, and that was kind of the first time I really looked at it, and I was like, oh shit, this is really cool. But I remember the very first comic that I myself ever owned and read was Captain America #1 by Mark Waid and Ron Garney. The whole Heroes Reborn stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I really liked that. So I was kind of peripherally reading stuff here and there. I wasn't really getting into it, but it wasn't until they started Ultimate X-Men. And I was like, all right, this is when I'm gonna get this book every month. It was became a habit for me. I was like, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna get this monthly. I'm gonna start it with it's a #1. I'm gonna get in there. I never read comics, but I already knew how to you gotta get #1 and then you gotta continue with. So I stuck with that. And I did the Ultimate. I came into Marvel through the Ultimate stuff. So it was that for a long time, and then my first real big jump into the 616 with House of M. So you can kind of imagine the severe whiplash that would cause.
Yeah.
Of just jumping into that event and trying to figure out what the hell was happening. But that was kind of the fun of it, was just sort of diving in, and then I had no idea who the Sentry was, what House of M was going on, what happened to Scarlet Witch. So then I started doing backtracking. And I had a very casual knowledge of everything to thus far, the 90s and stuff, between the animated series and just being around it all. I was aware of most of these characters and what they are fundamentally, but that was really when I was getting into all of the minutia of canon and all that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. So it was kind of, the big fun of when I finally worked with Bendis. Was I remember picking up House of M #1 right after I got my braces tightened. I feel really old. Yeah. So I had always read comics, and so from basically Ultimate X-Men #1, which is I think 2000, I've been consistently reading most Marvel comics. I think it's around Civil War, Secret Invasion, I was reading every Marvel comic. I think I bought every single Civil War tie-in there was, and I kept up with all of it. I don't know if I liked any of it. I was just I wanted to know everything.
Right.
I was very OCD about it. I would arrange my comics not by numerical order, but by chronological order. So I would figure out where different things would line up, or if a character was here, how could they show up over here? So this whole storyline must happen before then. It became really hard whenever Wolverine was involved. Okay, so he was in 10 places this week. Where does that So I read a lot of comics. I was super into it, but I never wanted to draw comics. It was a very severe wall off for me. this was something that I enjoyed, but I never wanted to do. Like there was a huge disconnect with, oh, you can make this. It never quite occurred to me. Like I mean, like I went to school for art. I went to an arts high school, so like I was already drawing for years, but like just the idea of drawing comics never quite clicked.
Hmm.
And it really wasn't until a Marvel editor was like not letting me say no. Uh, I was I had a day job. I took a year off from college and had a day job at Sideshow Collectibles. And in that time, I tried to test for a cover gig at Marvel.
Hmm.
Uh, I didn't get it. Uh, and then like 2 months later, the editor Nick Lowe hit me up uh, to want to hire me to do pages for him.
Hmm.
And so it was just kind of this weird like, oh, I guess I'm not getting it. Oh well, whatever. And then someone's like, hey, we want you to do this, completely like unrelated to each other. Like they weren't talking about it. Like it just Nick just hit me up out of the blue. Ironically, funny enough, Nick is my editor right now on Runaway. He's finally gotten me.
Yeah, Nick's a great guy, and it is kind of amazing. He's really incredible at like working with like longtime creators, but also kind of it's seemingly like finding creators kind of out of the blue. Like it seems like you weren't really even affiliated with comics, but because you did that test, it was like you're in their system, and he found you, and it was like, I need you to do this now.
It was kind of that, and kind of this thing of I remember it was going around Twitter a few weeks ago of like fan art got me the job. Um, I've been posting drawings online since I had my first computer when the very first iMac.
Hmm.
And doing the heyday of art forums and DeviantArt and all that stuff. So like I had this huge body of work of just me drawing Marvel fan art.
Hmm.
So I think what helped a lot was the fact that they could see that I can draw, or I mean I drew these characters.
Hmm.
Like I find whenever they hire an artist, they like to know. Marvel is very good at like hiring different styles for different needs if they know what you can do.
Hmm.
Like they never sort of hire someone to be shoehorned into something. Um, so with I was going to school for animation, so they could see I could tell stories, and then they saw that I could draw Marvel characters. So like, okay, well, let's just get them to do both at the same time. Stories about our characters. So like, there wasn't like any guesswork when they were trying to hire me.
Right.
Like, all right, we already know he can do it, so let's just get him to do it. So then it just became like a cat and mouse game of when I actually gave in to drawing characters for them, and it took Nick a while.
But at least he kept at it.
I think it took Nick a few years actually.
That's amazing.
Well, because like at the time I was taking a year off, but I was going to go back to school. I was going to finish out my last year. So I was like, Nick, I'm flattered, but like, I have no time for that. Like I'm literally going back to do my like thesis project in my college. But I want to do a cover gig. Like that was really what I like. At that point, that was my Marvel goal. Like
Mm-hmm.
to be in comics I wanted to do just do covers. That was it. Pages were scary, daunting, and a lot of work. Did not want to do them, but I wanted to do covers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he reluctantly like fine, I guess I'll give you a cover gig. And then it took about 2 more years of him just pestering me. And he was trying to like, okay, what about like he was giving me little shorts. Like, well, okay, what about if it's this page, like 20 pages, but I give you 2 months to do it. I'm like, I have no time, I can't do it. And he kind of like keep changing the deal, and then it ended up being the A+X story with Phantom X and Black Widow. Where he's like, all right, what about 10 pages, and you have 2 months to do it. I was like, all right, fine, I'll do it. Okay, fine. So he finally got me. So I did that story, and then after that, I was like, okay, well, I have this other story. It's 30 pages. We get like 3 months to do it, and it's like this one-off story about the original 5 time-displaced X-Men, and it's gonna be like a 3-parter with two other artists. The guy who's drawing issue 2 is Jake Wyatt, and the irony being was that Jake White and I had just worked together on the Nickelodeon Ninja Turtles show.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, oh shit, like, man, like, I already know Jake. And Nick had no idea about this.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of to your point of like, Nick was trying us out. Like this was Nick trying to, just throwing different artists together to kind of see how they worked on Marvel stuff. So like this became this huge test, and then that's kind of where he got me. And then right after that, I switched over to doing it full time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it actually, it kind of makes sense that covers would appeal to you because, coming from a fan art background, it's like I'm not saying that all covers are fan art, but like I could see like the parallels there in terms of your interests.
Yeah, it's like I'm just drawing the big iconic action shot of these characters. I'm not really like getting into the minutia of character acting and telling the story and all of these like all the boring drawings. Like it's Captain America versus Thanos on this cover. I'm like, great, awesome, let's do it. Rather than like, okay, well, and really breaking down stories. So like at the time, I was just like, I just want to do the big shots that seems easy and fun and simple, and it's one drawing a month. That's great.
Yeah.
And then they just kept roping me in further and further until I was 3 pages for them.
Well, the funny thing about that is, and I know it's entirely different what I enjoy versus what you enjoy in the actual creation of it. But like, I love your storytelling. I love your character acting. It's such an important part of everything you do because like, like in the Star-Lord mini, there's like a lot of different things that you did that really made like the visual humor and the character acting work so much well. Like there's this one inset panel where like Agent Brand makes a sassy comment about Daredevil in the courtroom, and Matt Murdock gives her eyes and she gives him eyes, and it's just like this perfect little inset panel moment that like just it slayed me. It killed me. I actually just started laughing. I was weirdly reading in the bath and I was laughing to myself in the bath as my wife was probably thinking I'm an insane person.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think that stuff is really interesting. You mentioned your animation background. You interned at WB Animation. You also went to Cal Arts to study animation. I'm curious, like, how much do you feel that your animation background specifically impacted the way like you kind of tell humor with your visuals and also the character acting?
A lot. I think I almost owe it entirely to that. The fact that I'm good at character acting is entirely because I spent 4 years doing character acting.
Mm-hmm.
It's 4 years of tell a story. I mean, at least like it's storyboarding, so you can kind of you kind of use whatever you want to use to tell the story. But for me, the fun was I did a lot of like it's just a single shot on the character, like my entire like. So every year, CalArts, you make an animated film. My entire second year film was one middle wide shot, and it was just entirely about acting. Like, 'cause that was the fun part for me. That was the real part of. It never becomes a grind. It never becomes tedious for me. It's just about like, how do I tell what is happening in this person's head by what they're doing, and it's little ticks of like how they move. The degree of the facial expression, what expression are they not doing? Not looking is tells just as much as looking. So it's like all these little factors. Because I always wanted to be a design guy
Mm-hmm.
and do character design and all that. Like I was never really interested in like boarding or animating, but I wanted to do design because done well and done thoughtfully, you can tell an entire character's backstory in just the design of their clothing.
Right.
You can put as much character in there as you want and tell so much story by never actually telling you a story. And that was always the most fun for me. So, with comics, it kind of took a while to get to a point in which I was getting books that relied on that. Like not a lot of big two superhero extravaganza books really like give you moments to breathe into character acting.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like sort of this weird heaven that is Runaways, is that it's entirely character acting.
Yeah.
This entire book is just character acting all the time. What's being said, what's not being said, who's looking, how many different ways can I draw kids crying? Like that becomes part of it. Like, how do I just draw uncomfortable people avoiding their issues all the time in different, in interesting ways?
Mm-hmm.
like every issue is like, all right, so which character is sad this time that doesn't want to talk about it? Okay, like what's their body language like? Just how someone stands, how someone looks. Like a very key thing in issue 3 of Runaways was the fact that the entire conversation between Nico and Carolina, Nico won't look at her.
Mm-hmm.
And they're having this huge heart to heart, and it was in the script. I mean, this was something Rainbow had included in the script, but to sort of like tell this story and kind of map them through this room, and they're not looking at each other, but what is Nico looking at? What is Nico like? What's on her face? How is she still telegraphing this conversation and what's going on in her head? And do all this while she's not acknowledging Carolina until the very end. Like, so there's a lot you can do with it if you have the space for it. And thankfully, Runaway does have a space for it. But a lot of it stems from I had to do this for 4 years, and I think it's kind of given me like it definitely changed like what I can do, what I'm good at, and what people hire me for.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frankly more fun for me. Like I like doing the big action, but it's really more fun of just like, the 3 pages, 4 pages in Uncanny X-Men of just Dazzler having a breakdown and having her flashbacks to her glory days and just kind of lamenting how far she's come since then. And like, that was more fun for me than this kid blowing up S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that one thing I'm kind of interested in is the fact that it seems like because of your background, because of animation, like it the way you have like characters express themselves, even as like subtly different. Like a good example, like going back to that courtroom scene in Star-Lord #2, there's this one moment where like Star-Lord reacts in the background in like a much more like, I don't know, it kind of feels like a more animated way. It's like you can see the motion of his head hitting the table because it's just like a debacle.
Mm-hmm.
And like that moment was like something that I don't think a more traditionally backgrounded comic book artist would have approached that with. And I feel like that is like a subtle thing that comes out in your art because of your animation background. It's like you kind of express it with more emotion and with more
Sure,
I
yeah.
don't want to say cartoonish because that seems insulting, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, because it needs to read clearly and immediately,
Right.
and so you kind of have to over exaggerate it just a little bit, and it's finding that line. It's
Right.
finding that line of what is like a goofy reaction, and like all their arms are flailing or where a real person probably wouldn't even lift their arms at all when they're angry.
Mm-hmm.
But like to find that just that middle ground of like what is that little titch of like what's that quick millisecond moment that I can capture that expresses that entire emotion regardless of the dialogue.
Right.
And what's funny when we brought up the Matt and Brand having that quick, I mean, I added that.
Oh,
Like
I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, that was an inset that I added. Like I don't think it was in the script. It was just like to express the idea that these two are like staring each other down. I'm like, well, let's make that its own moment.
Mm-hmm.
Let's I want to like really show that these two are staring each other down. So like I cut that out and just like that's a key moment for the humor and for what this scene's about is that these two characters know exactly who each other are and they're just trying not to say it.
Yeah, well, and it also like I'm a huge fan of Agent Brand. Like I love Sword. I thought that was a great comic. And I love like she's so sassy, and like I feel like that was one of the few times in Agent Brand's history that she was done completely right, besides Sword. And so like her doing things like that, and then at the end when she does the finger eyes thing to Rocket Raccoon,
Yeah, that one was fun. That one was fun.
yeah, like those things are great because it really conveys a lot. The curious thing about the inset panels though is like it's so tough like to really attribute who does what in a comic because like a person could assume that Chip scripted that like rather than you adding that in. It's hard to know who does what. Like I wasn't sure. I didn't want to assume that you did it because I didn't want to assume insult Chip, but I didn't want to do vice versa,
Insult Chip.
I did that plenty when it was on the podcast.
Well, what's the interesting thing, like especially to go to Runaways, is that other than issue 1, Rainbow hasn't done any breakdowns on any pages. Like I asked her not to. Issue 1 was the only one ready by the time I signed on. She had already written all 6 issues before I'd even joined the book.
Right.
But issue 1 was the only one that was really like broken down comic style, ready for any artist. And when we kind of came down to it, I asked Nick Lowe, and I told her, I'm like, you don't need to worry about it. Like, I kind of had Chip already start doing this for me of like Marvel styling it, where like a lot of the fight scenes in Star Lord are just page descriptions.
Mm-hmm.
But so on Runaways was like, and because she's so used to writing character driven, dialogue driven stories, that it's all written beat by beat rather than like a big paragraph. So like I was already reading it like as panels. So I'm like, okay, so these two are talking there, then like that emotion's a different panel. So I already broke it down as I was reading it myself, and I was like, I've been doing this for several years at this point. So like, instead of you forcing yourself and taking too much time doing something that you're not used to, let me just handle it.
Yeah.
So almost all the scripts, like all of the beat breakdowns or like how the pacing is, that's entirely me.
Mm-hmm.
From issue 2 onwards. Uh, issue 1 a little bit, but like I mean that one is largely already figured out.
Mm-hmm.
But from basically ever since from 2 on, all the pacing is me. Like in issue 3, Runaways, is that old Lace looking at the roommate or
Mm-hmm.
the next door neighbor beat like that. Like I added the note panel, like that was all me because like they had this little side beat that this neighbor comes out, sees old Lace, and like, nope, peace out. But like I can't make that play in one big shot, so I needed to make these two little things. So like I have total freedom on Runaways on how actual pacing and breakdowns work.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something we ever talk about. Just once it's presented out there, uh, it's out there.
Yeah.
Like I remember reading a review for issue 3, and someone had credited our great letterer for the lyrics coming out of Carolina's headphones. I'm like, I did all that myself. Uh,
Ah,
like I handwrite that, and I handwrite all of the like Runaways headers in each issue.
that's awesome.
Like I do all that myself. So, but it's like it's because every book is so different, and you never quite know who's doing what. Like whenever once it goes out there, unless we're like specifying page by page to every person, it's just one of those things that's because it's so fluid that really all that matters is that the final product is good.
Yeah.
That is something that no one really ever talks about.
It's funny that you mentioned that moment because I was actually going to ask about sound effects next. There's this like one part in Star Lord, and I apologize to keep asking about Star Lord. I just happened to read that, and
You just read it, yeah.
now I'm like obsessed with it, and I just want to talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
But there's this one moment in Star Lord where Daredevil flips his business card to Star Lord, and it's got this like elegant flipping motion behind the card, but there's also this little cursive FLK flick that is done in the SFX or the sound effects. So like I love those little elements. Is that you? Is that like a scripted element, or is that something you kind of put in? You take ownership with your art.
Chip does include sound effects, but then I hand draw it all.
Mm-hmm.
I think only a few places in like issue 5 did they actually add in extra sound effects. So I think when it came like when they saw the final product, I guess there just wasn't enough for like a fight scene or something. But other than that, anytime Chip wrote in a sound effect, I drew the sound effect in.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Well, as I say, because it's something I picked up from like Somni and Ribic, where the sound effect plays a compositional element to the page. So if I need to adjust a page to accommodate this big sound effect, this big boom or blam, I want to be in control of where that goes
Mm-hmm.
and how impactful that is. So like, I may as well do it myself,
Right.
so that I can control that layout and the eye direction. I mean, most letters do it great, but like I just wanted to make sure, especially because it's something I'd never really done myself.
Mm-hmm.
Before Starlord, I don't think I ever included sound effects.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just like this sort of this experiment on my end of like, let me see if I can do it and really kind of help play in how these pages work.
Right. I do think that one element that's kind of underrated about that too is like I can tell just by the writing, like the way that you do your line art, that was your handwriting doing the FLK in there because it's just like there's a consistency there. There's like an organic consistency between the look of the sound effects and the line art. And I kind of feel like if you had somebody else do the sound effects, it would be like there'd be like a dissonance between that sound effect and the art that's on the page.
Yeah, yeah, that used to always super bug me. Like for a long time, I was very much in the camp of I preferred no sound effects at all because it would always stand out so hard to me.
Right.
Just seeing this super clean vector word
Yeah.
on top of an artwork that it could just like the line qualities just don't match. So it just stands out really far.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always really nice when I see, I'll just end up like gushing about Kris a lot. But just the fact that he hand draws it all himself, like it just feels part of that world, and it feels more comic booky to like see it hand drawn. Like it seems more fun.
Yeah, absolutely. This is where we're going to start diving into Runaways full out. I want to talk about like your personal background with Runaways. At a certain point in your life, you were reading everything Marvel did, so I imagine you have a personal background with Runaways. Were you a fan before you signed up for the project?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if it was still around when I was like really diving into Marvel. Like I think Civil War, no, it did because it was still because I read the tie-in.
Mm-hmm.
There was that crossover with Young Avengers that was really good. Um, so Runaways #1 by Brian K. Vaughan and Alfona started the first month of my freshman year of high school.
Mm.
So it was like right at like the right time for me. And I was picking it up. I really didn't kind of think too much on it until like I had like a few friends who really got into it and was like trade lending, and I was like, and that's when I really kind of like got into it. It's odd because it's like it never quite like I thought the book was great, but like it never really quite clicked or dawned because I was a teenage kid from LA. Like,
right, you didn't have distance from
so,
it.
Yeah, this seems so normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
Like kids seem like I literally knew a Carolina. I literally knew a Gert. Like, so I was like I don't want to read a book about another one of them. Like I already have. But like I always liked the book. I'd read the whole thing. So when they were pitching, because after Star-Lord ended, I didn't know what I was going to be doing, and I was waiting. And like Marvel likes to drag out offers, they like to like let me sweat a bit until they give me the next book. And I was sweating hard, and they're like, "No, don't worry about it. We got something. We're just not ready to tell you what it is yet. We're still figuring things out." I'm like, "Oh, come on." And they finally were like, "Okay, so we have an idea. What about Runaways?" And I immediately was just like, "No, no, no." Like that's way too important. Like absolutely not. Like people have been clamoring for a Runaways book, like a real return to the Runaways for years, and I was like, "No, like that's way too much pressure." And it's Nick Lowe again, and just Nick Lowe will not take no. Just like, all right, well, just read the script. Like he buys me one of Rainbow's books, and he mails it to me. He's like, just read the script, and then we'll talk about it later. And then I read the script, and I was like, all right, I'm in. But like, I had this severe guttural, like just like absolutely not. There's someone better than me needs to do this because this is way too important. So like yeah, like I grew up with these kids, and like it was this weird like it still hits me now that like I'm drawing the Runaways.
Yeah.
Like I just think I'm still just doing fan art, but like no, like I'm drawing Runaways. Like what the fuck?
Yeah, I feel like I know that this wouldn't change your own feelings, but like Oliver Sava from the AV Club is like the world's biggest Runaways fanboy, and he was like so on board.
I think I picked up on that.
He was so on board when he saw your name on there, and I feel like that's immediate like buy-in from probably the person who would be judging it the strongest. So that
it was like the reaction was nice about it because it didn't click with me for
right.
a long time above like how much this book plays to all the strengths that I felt I had, but I never really quite used.
Right.
Like I was, like one thing I really liked about Starler was I got to finally do normal clothes for once. And I'm like, oh, character acting. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's about like some brown kids that grew up in LA. I'm like, oh yeah. I'm like, I was born in LA. Like I know what that's like. And like I know the places, and like, oh yeah, they were teenagers when I was a teenager. Like, oh yeah, and, like they wear clothes, and like they know, all their stuff is melodrama act. Like, so like all of these weird like things checked off that like I never quite realized until I was doing it. I'm like my entire life has kind of just been to do the Runaways. Like all of it was just practice for the Runaways.
You were in high school during their hate when they first came out. I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
that was basically like you preparing for this moment.
exactly. Like it's just sort of all living in LA my whole life, and you know, like I knew these kids. Like in a large way, like I was Victor. Like there was, I grew up in East LA, a nerd, surrounded by gang dudes all the time. Like I knew these things. It's like, oh yeah, I guess I have a lot of like strengths in this. Okay, I guess I should probably do this.
Hmm.
No, it was just this funny long process that like I was so against it, but like it just ended up being so I'm like, all right, yeah, okay, yeah, I see it, I'll do it.
I think sometimes when we have those types of things that are just such perfect fits, it's almost like we want to rebel against it because you're like, there's no way it could be this. No, no, like it
Yeah,
just can't
yeah,
be.
yeah.
I did want to, I think that it's fair to say that people associate you quite a bit with style in the way that the characters look, both in like the redesigns you've done for superhero costumes, but also in just the way that the characters dress every day in like Star Lord and beyond. But it was Runaways particularly appealing to you because the cost or the characters themselves are young people who don't necessarily have traditional superhero costumes.
Um, yes and no. I mean, like it was definitely a strength that like it was a thing I wanted to do, like that I really hadn't gotten to do. Like, not a lot of superhero books give you that opportunity to like dress them up out of costume.
Sure.
I do enjoy drawing costumes. Like I do think it's a lot of fun. So like I don't mind, a team book full of spandex. It's a fun exercise for me. But it was just sort of like I was at a point of like this was a itch I had never really scratched before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so with the Runaways, it was like here's kind of the perfect opportunity of like that's all they wear, and like there are some times it might be kind of nice to like throw a superhero outfit on them because it makes things a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
You know, each
Standardized.
issue, yeah, each issue I'm spending a week just building their wardrobe for that issue.
Right.
Like that is a chunk of my time is to like, all right, well, what's happening this issue? What are they doing? So, um, how do I change that? Well, what fits this issue? As opposed to, okay, so like, I had to go through like, so issue 5, there's 17 outfits
Mm-hmm.
for all the kids. And I'm like, go through, I'm like, all right, well, what's happening in this scene that like breaks down? Okay, so there's a lot of work that goes into it for, one panel
Right.
of that outfit. But, it takes me a long time to do it. Um, so like it's a really fun exercise, but like there are just moments I'm like I just make them all tights. Jeez.
One of when I was driving home, I was thinking about something weirdly that I hadn't thought of about the book since I started reading like the new volume you guys are doing. And you were talking about this earlier, like how like what a character wears says something about them. It's meaningful. But like for Gert, because she's time displaced, she's coming from 2 years in the past. Like, do you like approach her wardrobe a little bit differently because she's coming from like a different mindset than the more modern, rest of the cast?
Boy, howdy did we. Gert, her, Gert herself took about 3 weeks to figure out what we were going to do with her stylistically. Um, Gert is a character very important to Rainbow, so it was kind of the only character that really had an oversight on that we really like just really pressured to get right. Um, a lot of the other characters, Nico, Chase, we kind of grew up with.
Right.
So we've seen them around, so we kind of know where they are now. Like they were really easy to sort of figure out what sort of 2017's version of these kids are. Um, like I knew Carolina instantly. I had the second we were like gonna do her, like that was an immediate click.
Mm-hmm.
But Gert was always kind of tricky because how do you do someone from the early 2000s whose entire style is anti-conformity
Right.
in a time which anti-conformity is conformity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, well, like, how do we do it? Like, how does she rebel? Or like, what is that rebelling? What was she rebelling against? What was her style saying about that either doesn't exist now or does? and how do we change that to make that fit now? So like with the first arc of Runaways, kind of because it's happening so quickly and because she's time displaced, she has no clothes of her own.
Right.
Um, issues 2 and 3, she's entirely wearing Chase's hand-me-downs.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's like a level of like, there's not much we can do with her.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also like, how do we show that she has nothing to her name through her clothing? But then, but we did spend 3 weeks trying to nail down on like, okay, when we do actually get to the point that she starts building her own style again, what is that style? What is the 2017 version of that weird eclectic 2000s look?
Right.
So she took a long time.
Yeah.
We were all over the place with her. An idea that we got that didn't go anywhere, but I thought was really funny is that we just kept making jokes about the fact that she was dead. So like all of her clothes would have either like a skull on it or like bones or something. Like so, there's always this little thing of the fact that like because I think she would kind of make a morbid joke out of the fact that like I was just dead.
Yeah, she would definitely think it was funny.
So so that was an idea we kind of threw around with. Like Gert was hard. Gert was a very difficult person to deal with. Just because she was such of a time
mm-hmm.
that to also keep of that time, but also age her too.
Right.
Well, not age her, but like she doesn't. The whole point is that she hasn't grown up at all. But how do we modernize that style, but also keep that style?
Right.
Whereas everyone else can kind of grow. Carolina went to college. I can kind of do a little bit with her. Molly's 2 years older. Chase has moved on. Nico has kind of had his life. Like I can kind of age them up a little bit and sort of change their style a little bit. But with Gert was like, keep the style, but change the style at the same time. What is that? And we're like, oh my God.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. I do really always appreciate your solutions you come up with people's costumes, though. Again, I have to give a Star-Lord shout out because I screenshotted Javelin's coat in issue number 6. I don't know if you remember what coat I'm talking about.
Which one? The issue,
the blue coat. That's
fur?
Yeah, no, it's like a blue coat that's kind of like it's hard to explain. It's like it's very interestingly shaped because like certain panels are wider than other ones, and it's as soon as I saw it, I was like, I love this coat, and I'm not typically somebody who sees a coat and I'm just like, I love this coat. So when I saw it, I just like. I'll send you a screenshot of it later so you know which one I'm talking about. But like,
is it when she's talking to 8-Ball in
yes,
soccer?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was just this coat I saw on Pinterest. Like I was like, I started slightly making Pinterest boards for people, or like not. I mean, I don't think actually it was Pinteresting at the time. I think I was just saving files. Mm-hmm. And at that time, I just saw this coat that was it was like a normal overcoat, but it had these horizontal stripes of like wool.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that's the correct kind of lavish that Javelin is.
Yeah.
But it has to be lavish, but not loud.
Right.
And that was kind of her whole style was based on the fact that like she always dressed better than everyone else, but she also could disappear in a room.
Mm-hmm.
So it was this coat of like, yeah, that feels about right. That feels, and I had to use like, it was like a lot of fun building Bran's wardrobe. I don't think we've ever seen Bran outside of, her whatever her uniform is at the time.
Right.
So it was really fun. Actually, maybe I'm astonishing. I don't remember. But it was really fun kind of building her look of just like, what is this kind of very uptight, reserved woman go out into the streets? So like with her, it was kind of like this sort of high class business badass. Like it's just sort of this weird mix of very solid straight lines. Mm-hmm. Like her silhouettes are very clean and clear. The overcoat over the shoulders, the trench coat. Like there had to be care to it. There had to be a style to it, but it had also not be fancy. Like she's not a fancy woman,
right?
But she's a very clear styled woman, and she has to look imposing and immediately looks like she's in charge of the room.
Right. It's kind of like she's like iconic, but she doesn't want to stand out. Like there's that one scene where Peter just comes over to like get her a drink or something. Oh no, he had just finished like beating up or kicking out the dude who was like going after her and everything. But and like you just see her and like her look and everything, and it's like it really is a visual manifestation of a person who is basically the best thief in the world without anybody knowing it.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I want to talk about your art process. Let's say you get a new script for Runaways from Rainbow. What's your process like from getting that script to sending files onto Matt for colors?
Okay. So the whole okay. I mean, the first thing is roughing out the whole issue, and this book takes me a little longer than most other books because of the fact that it's not broken down by panels.
Mm-hmm.
So like like on Star-Lord, I would read a page and be like, okay, so there's 6 panels on this page, and I was kind of like mentally like, okay, like this needs to be the panel layout really quickly in my head, and then just kind of like go through and then just sort of like fill in the panels. But with Runaways, it's very much the fact that I have to really like break down beats and sit there and like, it's this huge dialogue thing of like, but where are the breaks in this dialogue? Where do there need to be moments where there's breathing room or there's not breathing room? How much can I condense? How much, this page reads really long, but it could be really short, or it's a really short description, but it's a really long page, because there needs to be a lot of expressions. Like it's really quick to, runaways are shocked, but like, do I need to show each of them? Do we need to have a moment where we see all of their faces individually, or is it fine to like have them as a group together? So like, I have to really figure out the tone of that scene, the pacing of that scene. So I spend about 2-3 days just figuring out roughs. And then basically from then on, it's just this mad dash to get it on time.
Mm-hmm.
I penciled the whole issue chronologically, so I go from page 1 to the very end. And then once I'm done pencils, then I go back and I ink it. Like from then on, it's fairly rudimentary. The rest of it is just like put everything on model, and get the acting right. But well, I guess there's a step before all that, in which after roughs, in which I spend a day or two building that wardrobe for that issue.
Mm-hmm.
I draw out a style guide that I can send to Matt, so there's no questions in which the colors for everything is. And then I gather reference for like a day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big reference fiend. Like I really, literally will not draw a single thing that isn't referenced. Like it bothers me a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It can be really rudimentary. Like what's a workbench? I'm like, okay, well, I gotta look at workbenches and like figure out what kind of workbench works well for this room. Do I want to draw that many drawers? Like, no, not really. It's like it's kind of simpler work. Like I won't just make up one.
Right.
I spend a lot of time trying to find it. So I'll spend a lot of time researching. I'll go through every single page, every single panel, and sort of gather stuff that I think I'll need. And then, yeah, I mean, a lot of it's just research time, building their wardrobes, building all the reference.
Yeah.
And then after that, yeah, basically everything after that is just autopilot, just to pencil and ink it out the door.
Yeah.
Nothing really.
And you work digitally, right?
Yeah, entirely digital.
Yeah. I like that you do all the reference. I know reference is kind of sometimes like a weird issue for some people, whether you're talking about like photo reference where you're taking pictures of yourself doing things, or if you're going and creating models in SketchUp, or if you're like, I don't know, like you're saying, like gathering stuff about like workbenches or things of that sort. But the thing is like if you're a reader and like there's something that just feels not right in the room or feels not right on the panel, it's like it can take you out of the story. And it's like having authenticity and like verisimilitude to the art, it like makes it feel it like it's hard to express. It's like it doesn't take you out of the story, and so in that reason, it's succeeding in what you're trying to do.
Yeah, like one thing I hated when I was working on Captain Marvel was that like because of that, like because I like referencing, because I like making sure things look like they work, having to create like sci-fi ships all the time drove me nuts. So because it's so. Whereas I don't think a lot of people have this hang up, but but like, how does the landing gears work? And like, okay, so if the jet's flying, but what if you need to like hover? Like, what is that? Like, how do you do that kind of dynamic? I'm like, okay, I'm not going to just draw just a space jet.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I think reference it's good for as much as it works for you. I mean, if finding reference is a hinder and it slows someone down, don't do it. But if whenever I'm reading something and I see like, I have no idea how that works. Like, how is that just a wall? How is this like a super advanced room, just a wall of boxy computers?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what's going on here? Um, and it takes me out of it. So like, I try my best to never have my own problem.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so I want things to look uh, like they can work within the parameters of that world.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it needs to make it like it needs to look like the characters know it works. So I'll just try to research as much to like get some basis of it to make it seem like it can function or like it looks real. Because then there's a huge suspension of disbelief that you have to go into these books. That if I can kind of like help alleviate at least one of those things that you don't have to worry about,
Mm-hmm.
I think it makes reading a lot smoother.
Right.
You're not like, I don't understand anything that's happening on this page. What is any of this? And so you have to like really work at it, and I think that kind of slows down reading
Right.
because it draws attention to it. It draws everything that doesn't look like it works, draws a massive amount of attention, and I think that helps damage your enjoyment of what you're reading. So one less thing to worry about, I think, kind of helps go a long way to like the rest of the damn thing.
Mm-hmm. I think I think I had Michael Lark on my podcast and we talked about a similar thing where he gets so he wants to make sure everything feels real. So like he'll have to like design like a future motorcycle for Lazarus. And like he gets so locked into those details of trying to make it right that it's like, it's almost like the sci-fi element is like kind of, it makes it a real struggle because you have to make sure that these things work in the way that they're supposed to work in the real world if they actually existed.
Yeah, like I was just for fun. I was designing like a wasteland motorcycle,
Mm-hmm.
and I was just sitting there. I'm like, yeah, like like the character like I wanted to do was like this oversized person, like 8 feet tall. So I'm like, all right, so, well, a normal motorcycle wouldn't work because it can't fit. So it has to be kind of this weird jerry rigged thing out of scraps to make a bigger motorcycle. I'm like, all right, so then do I do a bigger tire? Like, I guess I could do a bigger tire. You know what would really work on like a desert, like treads, like tank treads. But okay, but then like how do I get a tank tread to work underneath, a body of a motorcycle? Does it go the full length of like? So I went down this whole like 3 hours of just researching, how this fictional bike that doesn't do anything can work with treads as opposed to tires, as opposed to, because I'm like, well then, but like, how does the treads turn? Like, can you just use like a motorcycle? Does it lean? And like that'll help turn. Or if I put a sidecar on it, I can't lean. So it has to like, so like I was just going off and thing of like, just trying to get this fucking sketch of a motorcycle for fun to work in my own head, and it just took me hours to do.
Yeah.
Because it's like I think just though each one of those things that the reader doesn't have to wrap their head around is
Mm-hmm.
one less problem down the road. And I think the thing I like about reference and the thing I like about trying to get a level of it works is that it adds parameters to you. And I think, at least for me, parameters help me work better because it helps eliminate, when I can do anything, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
So by restricting myself in some ways of like, well, then this room has to work or this bike has to work, or like, it helps sort of relegate down a lot of X factors in my head. I'm like, okay, well then if none of these can work, then I'm down to like 5 options that I need to figure out how all that works.
Right.
And I just feel like it makes things feel more, real, as in, when figuring out like bedrooms is the same thing of like, like what, who are these kids? What are they into? I'm not just going to design generic beds. All these things will be little tiny factors that'll go into it. That I'll spend a lot of time researching of like, how would Nico, decorate her room? Would she
Right.
not decorate? Would she decorate? what kind of shoes does she have? And I'll fill in these little things that like I'm spending a lot of time researching just for a little item in the background because I think because every item says something.
Mm-hmm.
And by adding that level of like scrutiny, it helps build a better presentation to the audience
Mm-hmm.
that this feels, thought out. This feels like someone actually within that world spent time thinking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're not thinking about it, then how is it supposed to look like the character you're trying to get me invested in looks like it thinks about?
Yeah.
Um, so like so a lot of my process is just that. It's just, and I think a lot of that comes back to animation, where every decision you make about a character is determined by what's going on in their head.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, an exercise we used to do at school. I mean, I did. I think I probably did it more than most people. Was especially when I was designing, was I would figure out the walk.
Mm.
Like in my head, like I have an Emma Frost walk. I have an Abigail Brand walk. That like how I carry myself as them, and then that would determine how the facial expression,
Mm-hmm.
the clothing they would wear. Like just like getting in their head helps to figure it all out because that eliminates so many X factors. That if you understand that character, if you understand the difference between Nico and Molly and Gert, so many decisions are already made for you.
Yeah.
Just understanding them. And I think, reference is a tool to be used in that sort of exercise because then you're bringing in real things that these kids would have access to or these kids would think about to help add to the illusion that these are real.
Right. Now I'm trying to imagine what Emma Frost's walk is like.
Did you ever see that? It was the gif of Charlize Theron from Huntsman, where you like bring it from the core, stand straight up, and then think murder and walk.
That sounds like Emma Frost right there.
But it's a fun thing I always wanted to do. I always wanted to do an Emma book for the fact that like in my head I've always had this thing of like Emma's telepathic. Like like she could easily just be presenting you what she wants you to think of her, and
Mm-hmm.
she's just standing there in her PJs,
Right.
like not giving a shit. But like you don't know that. Like she's making you believe that she spent 3 hours on this outfit just to go out, but like she's just there in some like really comfy pants and just eating some yogurt. Just like yeah, whatever. Like I don't give a shit.
That is awesome. I had never thought about that. That would be amazing though. But so I want to ask about collaboration specifically with your frequent partner, Matt Wilson, the colorist. Often my podcast becomes a Matt Wilson fan club podcast. I feel like it might happen
Sure.
here. What is it about his colors that complete your line art so well?
Uh, I don't know. Like Matt and I like I feel like Matt and I have been like I feel like Runaways is the first time in which he and I are really working together well.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a combination between working together for 3 years. Um, Funny enough, like he was the colorist I was always wanting to get when I was anytime I was doing a book at Marvel. And it wasn't until Captain Marvel did his schedule finally open up, and we had enough lead time that we actually could go shopping for a colorist. A lot of times, there's just kind of the colors I had were sort of necessity.
Mm-hmm.
So, once I got him, I was like, I'm never letting him go. He's never coloring anything other than that. And I feel like he and I have had a lot of growing pains. Just kind of like not so much get on the same page as each other, just sort of like find something that we both kind of approach the same way. I feel like Captain Marvel was a lot of us just sort of figuring out things.
Mm-hmm.
Star-Lord was a little bit better because he kind of got more grounded, and I think that gave Matt more to work with. But I feel like Runaways was really the book in which he and I both like clicked immediately.
Right.
And there's just like a workflow process that we're figuring out. He's figuring out how to color me. I'm figuring out how I like to be colored. Like I like a flatter coloring render as opposed to like how he colors Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
He very renders Jamie, and I like mine a little pulled back, but like he can't go full like Sami, where he's like flats on Sami.
Right.
It's like finding that middle ground of like where we can go. So it's like it took us a little bit, but like Matt just he knows color,
Yeah.
like that just sort of helps everything. Like that makes everything work. But it's sort of funny that he and I have been working together for 3 years, but he and I traded our phone numbers to each other for the first time like last week.
Hmm.
Like up until now, we've just been emailing, or I've been sending him Twitter DMs, hoping that he checks them ever. If I ever if everything I need to say, like we finally just like got to the point. I'm like, should we just text? Is that easier?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I think that might make this like a whole lot simpler.
That's awesome. So, does he color your covers?
No,
Oh, okay. So you did the cover to Star-Lord #6 by yourself.
every cover is done by myself. There's only a few that he's I think at this point, as the one he just did this week for me, he's only colored four covers for me total. It's like a Rogue One cover, a Champions cover, an A Force cover, and then this new one I just did.
Okay.
I guess I could say what it is. Like Will Moss tweeted out the Lockjaw cover.
Okay.
So like other than that, I color all myself.
Okay. I was going to give you a compliment because Star-Lord #6 is 100% one of my favorite covers of the year. Like I'm obsessed with covers, and like to me it's like the thing that makes a good comic cover is one, it has to be a good piece of art. Two, it has to like stand, like if you're at a comic shop, you're walking down like looking at all like the stands and the racks and everything like that. It has to stand out while you're on there. And then three, I like it to actually reflect what's happening on the inside of it. And it's like #6 like really hits those three big time for me.
Which
And
one?
that's the
Which
one.
one's that one? I totally forget.
No, that's the one where Star-Lord is in a suit wistfully looking at a beautiful night sky. And it's like
Oh yeah.
it's the issue. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it, but it's like a sad thing happens in that issue, and it's like the
Oh, if they haven't read it by now, like
that's true. That's true. But I mean, like that one
yeah,
really got me, and I remember somebody animated it, and it really blew me away.
yeah. The guy asked me for the file for that one. Um, I think it works really well, like, especially with like there's like a lot of ideas to it. Of like, I mean, there's the funeral to it, but there's also like the starry sky to mirror the issue one.
Hmm.
We did the starry sky by Van Gogh as the background to kind of like play that whole like he's on Earth and they're not real stars.
Right.
We sort of wanted to make this cover about this sort of idealized space that he misses, that he's been on Earth for so long now that he's looking out at these things. Like I hyper amped up the space
Hmm.
to really kind of make this super romantic. But ironically, being it's one of the most boring covers for me to work on. It's like just did a back shot of a dude in a suit and some trees. I'm like, okay. But so like it plays really well. Like the end product is very good in what it presented, but it was just so boring to do.
Yeah. That goes back to what I was saying earlier, where it's like, the way that we perceive everything as readers sometimes is completely different the way it is actually for you guys.
Yeah, like when they were like, let's just do this cover, and I was like, fine.
Boring.
Yeah, I was like, all right, whatever. But like it works because it works for that story. Like it works to tell what was going on in that issue, and like it shows so much about sort of the thesis of that book.
Hmm.
That no matter and that's kind of like it kind of becomes the thing of like it doesn't matter how much I want it or not. It matters what works for the book.
Right.
And to kind of close out the statement on that arc was this sort of like it needs to be this sort of Peter misses what he took for granted,
Right.
and yeah, he's really not trying to think about it. So like we just did, I think it was a version of the cover where like the Guardians were in the stars.
Hmm.
I was like that's just too hammy. I think no, there was also a version. There was going to be a panel in that in which like where the widower, the widow was talking to him about like some issues, the whole just the appreciation of going to do the Guardians in the clouds, and they're like that's too much too. So like we just did like there was a group face in the tree, but I think the letter the bubble
Oh
blocks
my
it.
God, that's so funny.
Yeah, there's a little Groot face in the tree. I'm like, just something. And I'm like, I don't know if that plays, but okay, it's funny. Go with it.
That is funny. All right, so I just have a couple more questions before we get into 5 questions about Kris, the person. One of my patrons had a question for you. He noted that some artists struggle to portray children or preteens well, and he specifically said that you do it very well. He complimented your Molly. He wanted to know whether or not there's a character or type of character that you find particularly difficult to draw.
Dinosaurs. They're really fucking hard. Uh, like, like going into Runaways, I never would have thought of like that Old Lace would be the most difficult thing about this book.
Uh
Old Lace is the most difficult thing about this book.
huh.
Because it's like fighting a few different instincts of, I don't want her to be photorealistic. Because the only photorealistic thing I have is Jurassic Park. But I also think that's a little boring. Like, this is comics. Like, let's have a little fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of, especially, I use a lot of my decision making is built on the template that Adrian kind of like laid out with his first arc or his
Mm-hmm.
first run. And he really played up Old Lace. So I was like, okay, so we can make her a little cartoony, a little more fun. So I kind of was using, the animation background to really kind of over characterize her. But then the other risk is that I can't go too far because then she just looks like this weird, goofy cartoon character with all these realistic kids. So like finding that middle ground of like, how do I really kind of like, I can make it look like a raptor, but still express enough with her
Mm-hmm.
to show emotion and show acting. And I have to do that with what is supposed to be, a face that can emote. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't have eyebrows. It's like, it's a ridge. But like, but I have to treat like it's an eyebrow, and I have to, allow her jaw to, move in a completely non-realistic way to kind of get these emotions across. Um, and just like drawing raptors like heads straight on is really ugly and weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they don't look cool at all, and it drives me nuts. Uh, like the straight on shot of her in the beginning of issue 3, I think I redrew like 6 times because I just could not get it. And like even that one, like I still hate that version because I think it's bad. And I'm like, so Old Lace is a big one. Um, no, that's about it. Like, I kind of feel like with the beauty of Runaways is that there is so many different kinds of body types in there.
Mm-hmm.
Like I get practice with all of them. So there's nothing really that like I kind of feel too uh, apprehensive about anymore,
Sure.
other than dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. You did. I think I saw a smile on Old Lace's face when she was thinking about the family band.
Yeah, just like that of just like she can't like a dinosaur can't smile,
Right.
but like but I had to like play this tone of like she's like we're having a dinosaur daydream about a Hanna-Barbera style band with her friends.
Mm-hmm.
So like this whole thing is ridiculous. I'm doing a thought bubble of a dinosaur. Like, this thing is ridiculous. So like let's have it be a little fun and cartoony.
Mm-hmm.
But then it becomes about the like I can't go too far though.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. I have to read this. Can't be full Disney emote,
Right.
but it still has to read. So it's like this whole back and forth battle on every single time I draw. It's just like where is that line of realism and fantasy and cartoon, but fun and aesthetically pleasing, but you still know exactly what it is. And like it's this weird battle every
Mm-hmm.
single time.
Yeah. I totally understand. I mean, it is a fine line because it's like if you go too cartoony, then it feels not right, and then if you don't,
It stands out. She doesn't feel right with the rest of the kids, and the
it,
book breaks.
it's incongruous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the last question I had for you is about your recently launched online store. You sell prints, pins, covers, and original art. I think it's fantastic, and it's part of a trend that I really have enjoyed seeing in comics where, you're doing it, Jen Bartel's doing it, Kate Leth has done it, where you don't just create art, but you merchandise it. Why was that something you wanted to do?
Like the store specific, or like making the merch because one's got a very specific answer.
Okay, well, both in general, I guess, but I mean, you can do them as separate.
The store itself was just because like, I had an overstock of
Right.
stuff. I was like, I just want to get rid of all this, and people keep clamoring me to buy stuff online, and I hate doing shipping.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so when Jen kept raving about her store manager,
Mm-hmm.
so I was like, just made the content like, can you want to just do this for me too? She's like, yeah, sure. So basically that was it. I just wanted to get rid of my 2017 stock of stuff.
Right.
So going into 2018, it can be fresh and at least I can like kind of like approach it from a new standpoint of like I can really go over and see what I want to do as opposed to like, oh, these are all old things that I still have. I guess I should do something with it. I had prints in circulation for a while that like that doesn't sell anymore, but like I just had them, so like I kept bringing them to things because like I guess I should do something with them.
Mm-hmm.
So the online store made it a really easy way to kind of just negate middlemen and just sort of do it all at once,
Right.
and get it all out there. But like I think with sort of the rise of social media over the last 15 years, from like DeviantArt and all that, where it's something that gets talked about a lot in comics with conventions where growing up in the 80s and the 90s, you maybe had one chance in a year to meet a creator.
Mm-hmm.
If hopefully they came to a local convention. If not, these are just sort of like weird. They're just printed names on a piece of paper to you.
Mm-hmm.
And in sort of there's been this because of the boom in social media. These people are way closer to the audience. You have a direct contact now. So the artists themselves as a person, it's becoming more in the forefront, and they're becoming more and more their own brand.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that really helps with something that like Marvel like hires for, and it sort of helps artists when they cultivate themselves. Is like people come to you for you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just another artist at Marvel. If you pick up an Olivier Coipel book, you're picking up an Olivier book, or you're picking up, a Stewart book, you're going for Stewart, or, if you want Erica Henderson, like you get these people who are very much themselves.
Right.
And so there's a personal brand that kind of gets built out of that, of just people go to now specific artists because they like what that specific person does. And monetarily, it just sort of helps when you have your own merch, because then people are like, okay, well, I like you for you. So like, if you make other things too, that like from an artist that I already know and I already like, then there's more things that I can directly put money in your pocket. There isn't this, not everything has to go through your published work.
Right.
You can connect it directly to that audience yourself and have no middleman other than your own production capabilities. So it's sort of because kind of there's been this great thing of where you can support, the person specifically, rather than like I have to buy books and hopefully that gets back to this artist down the line that I don't even know who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can go like, oh, I can meet them, or I can go buy their stuff specifically, and I can buy their own art book, I can buy their own originals, I can buy, little things. And I think just there's kind of been a bigger culture of it has been kind of popping up. Whereas conventions have kind of changed from being just like a meet and greet signing thing to like you shop for little things.
Yeah.
You see pins popping up, you see prints popping up. People are going there because they want to get these little trinkets that they love, that reminds them of meeting that person, that they personalize, that they got to talk to the creator that they like, and they took something away from it. And so there's this been kind of great of like the only limit is what you yourself stop yourself from doing.
Right.
And it's also kind of, it's super tricky to kind of like figure out because then you have to really like self-examine and figure out what your brand is.
Mm-hmm.
Because, not everything you can make sells. There's things that I can do that like Jen can't. And there's things that I've done that when Jen does it better, like you can easily tell that like Jen should have already been the ones to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's like a playing game. So and there's a part of it that I really like because it's a lot of problem solving,
Right.
and I love that stuff. So like kind of figuring out what you want to do and opposed to like what sells and what people want from you, and like you can really like see like, okay, well, so like this is what you think of me through what you're buying from me, and it's just sort of fun.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it's like, not to make it a purely commercial thing, but something like a commission is like, it brings in money for artists, but it's a one-off thing. Or like a cover job can be the same thing, except for if you do it in traditional art, you can resell the cover art also. But when you do pins, you can like mass produce those, or when you do prints, you can mass produce those, and it actually kind of makes your life a little bit easier and kind of adds supplemental revenue streams. Not like I said, I'm trying not to commercialize it totally, but I mean that's
Sure,
got to be
yeah,
a factor.
it is. I mean, and it's also like, uh, you know, ordering pins. You sell them at such a low relative cost. $10 on average, and then the production cost to make them, your overhead on that pin is so much that you're making, I hopefully, ideally, you're making 70% on what you put down to make these things, and
Hmm.
you're just selling for $10 a pop. So you're selling a bunch because people are like, oh yeah, $10, I can throw that down. So you end up making arguably way more just on that than you would on like one commission that takes you hours to do.
Right. Exactly.
You got to spend, a few days getting these drawings done, or you spend an afternoon making a pin, you put a little money down, pin gets made, and then you sell that to several people. And you're like, okay, cool. So like a fraction of the work on my side, labor wise, at least, there's the whole problem of like figuring out what kind of pin, how to
Hmm.
market it, what works. There's a whole beginning stage to it that is a lot of work. But in terms of just physical labor, like it's so much less, and you could potentially see so much more that like I mean, like I never wanted to do pins. It just kind of became one of those things of like it's such an easy supplemental revenue to add to your table
Right.
that like why not spend that afternoon on little things like my pins were produced from like I sent a screenshot of like would this work and like all right I already got it mocked up ready to go. I'm like that wasn't even I didn't even save out a file. I literally just sent in a screenshot of like what I like what this could be and I'm just like no just change those colors and yeah I guess everything else is right. He's like okay cool
That's
let's go.
hilarious.
I'm like all right that's so easy.
All right, so I want to close with 5 questions about you, the person.
All
And
right.
to start with, I have to bring up something of Star Lord. You're very famous for abs. It's something that you do
Mhm.
really well. There was this one moment where it kind of crystallized in my mind. I think basically like somebody slashed at Star Lord and it cut his sweater open, so basically only his abs were showing. At a certain point, were you and Chip basically just conceptualizing different ways to showcase Star Lord's abs?
Uh, in all seriousness, I think Chip was more for it than I was.
Okay.
Um, like going into the book, we're like, I think coming off of Captain Marvel, where we were very conscious of downplaying gays.
Mm-hmm.
We were, one of the things is like our editor Sana was like we want kids to pick up this book. We want this kind of be for everyone. So kind of like if we can sort of rein in gays and really not have that be a big factor, that'll sort of help with sort of just kind of our mission statement for this book.
Mm-hmm.
So on that book, I was very just kind of like gotta hold it back, not really put that out there. But then when I was done with that book, I was like, I just sort of wanted to let that sort of let it go.
Mm-hmm.
So the next book I wanted to be very gazy, and the book they gave me Star Lord, and I'm like, okay, I'll do it if we can like get him shirtless like every issue. And like shit, like I'm like I hadn't thought of that, but all right, let's do it. And then like you got to the point of like that one scene of the sweater scene, like I was just like I'm just gonna do a fight scene, but like, Chip's like no, you got to tear off the shirt. I'm like, all right, I'll figure out what if you never wrote a moment in here where his shirt gets ripped off. I'm like, all right, I'll figure it out. Um, But then it gets really grotesque and like gratuitous to the point of like when we get strapped to a chair, I'm like, nah, they'll just take off the whole shirt now because it's torn. They don't want him sitting around in just a torn shirt. That just looks tacky.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's his whole shirt's off, and he's just sitting there like that. He's just gonna run around the city shirtless now. So it was like, I mean, it was a conscious thing, the workout scene and then changing his shirt in the first issue. It was something that we were playing up, but like Chip really was like every issue. I'm like, okay.
It was part of the brand. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah.
Next question I have for you. You have we've talked about your animation background. This is gonna be tough. There's gonna be a series of tough questions here. What is your favorite animated movie if you had to pick one?
Probably Ghost in the Shell.
Mm.
Close second is Tokyo Godfathers.
I have not seen that. I've never even heard of that.
It's by a director, Satoshi Kon. He passed away a few years ago, but he made Paprika,
Yeah.
Millennium Actress, and a few others. But like it's ironic because it sort of is that great little blend of realism but still cartoony. Like it was always something that one of my friends would say in college, whenever people were pitching sort of ideas, and he's like, yeah, but why is it a cartoon? Like, what about what you just pitched me? What about what you just pitched me? Does it need to be a cartoon rather than live action?
Right.
You're just telling a coming of age story about this kid, but like you just wrote it like just a regular run of the mill, normal real life story. So like, wouldn't that just be better if that was just live action? So it's just very conscious, like you gotta like, it doesn't have to be, Mickey Mouse, rubber hose cartoony, the sun is smiling cartoon, but like something about it needs to just kind of like show that you're thinking about the medium as well as the story. And I find with Satoshi Kon, especially Tokyo Godfathers, where like he will like every character looks really realistic, but then like there's scenes where they kind of go like Looney Tunes overacting,
Mm-hmm.
and it's hilarious, and like it fits, and like it strikes this great talent of like charm and real kind of grounded sadness to the story. And I mean, the story is about three homeless people, and just sort of that. I think it's been years since I've seen it. Like it kind of deals with one of them sort of dealing with her separation with her parents, and it's heart wrenching, but it's also super funny.
Mm-hmm.
And like it strikes this great balance of like it's a very grounded real movie, but also it needed to be a cartoon.
Right.
And I find it's just great. And then like and then Ghost in the Shell is just utterly incredible in every way. So
I'm gonna have to check out Tokyo Godfathers. But next question. You have one of the best signatures in comics, and it weirdly kind of reminds me of how like the tiling was done in the original Alien movie. What is its origin story?
Its origin story. It's on Uncanny X-Force number 9, the Psylocke getting a tattoo cover.
Mm-hmm.
She's listening to music on her iPod. Originally, the album I had drawn was a very kind of like rough, rudimentary version. Like if you knew what it was, you would know what it is, but like it doesn't look anything at a quick glance. It was for one of the Sleigh Bells covers.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's Comet Kid, or it's the Two Shoes. And I did that cover because I thought, that was something she would listen to. And then Marvel caught it, and they're like it's not like super overt, but I think just to be safe, we should probably take it out and change it to something else. So then I was just sort of like racking my brain of like what like that needs to be tiny, it needs to be this little like something needs to be on there to look like she's listening to something, but I don't know what. And then just out of nowhere, I just thought about like these 4 triangle shapes.
Mm-hmm.
And I sort of based the shapes off the letters in my name. And afterwards, I was like, you know what? Because at that point, I was just writing my name normally on covers, just A-N-K-A. And I was like, I may as well just like, since these shapes are already so close, like I'd probably make a version of it. Mm. And so it just sort of like branched out from there, where I just made sort of this version of my signature off those 4 triangles. And then every year, I've just been doing it ever since. And then every year I change the orientation of the letters.
Mm-hmm.
So 2016 is different from 2017. Yeah, figure out what 2018 is going to be. I'm running out of different orientations I can do. But yeah, so it was just this weird side thing that where I had to make a fake album cover, and I just based it on the letters of my name, but I just kept using it.
That's awesome. All right, so next question. For artists who spend way too much time at the drawing table, it's always good to have interests that get them away from the desk. You play video games, and I'm very envious of the fact that you've been playing Horizon Zero Dawn lately because I don't have a PS4 and I'm desperate to play that game. But this question is not.
What are you doing?
I have an Xbox. I'm a horrible person.
Oh God, come on.
Anyway, so this is going to be incredibly difficult. If you could play only one game for the rest of your life, which means you want something that's fun but also very replayable, what would you choose?
See, you threw a wrench in there with replayable, because like it's an idea that's been toying with my mind all year. Where I think Horizon is my favorite game of all time.
Oh God, don't say that to me. Now I want to buy a PS4 for like just one game.
You should. I mean, it's worth it. But it clicked every single thing, like just like how it feels, the gameplay of it. But if we're talking about if the whole point is replayability, I've bought Skyrim 3 times now on 3 different systems. So like it may just be by like default by addiction that. I bought it originally for the PS3, and then I just wanted to get. I put like 400 hours into it, and this is while I was in school.
Mm-hmm.
I put hours into Skyrim while I was in college, and when the PS4 came out, I was like, man, I just want to play Skyrim again. Like I don't want to like turn on my PS3 anymore. Mm-hmm. And then they released it. They released it in HD, and I was like, oh, like this is what I wanted forever.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that. I put like 100 hours into that one. And they're like, now we're releasing it on the Switch. You can have it on the go. I'm like, well, I'm buying a Switch now. So I bought a Nintendo Switch purely just to play Skyrim for the 3rd time.
That's amazing. I feel like Skyrim definitely has to be your answer, because if you buy a system for it, clearly you have a deep passion for that game.
Like the game is clunky and like real rudimentary, but like it has so many options, and it's such a great. For me, it's such a great casual game where I can just jump in and like have like a small task. Like a lot of it is just like walk there. I'm like, okay, I'll walk there. So it's like really beautiful vistas, and it's very calming until you're like, oh, I'm fighting a skeleton. Okay, let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a world I always want to go back to.
Right.
I mean, it's not a favorite game by any stretch, but like it's just sort of like escape. It's like a very calm escapism that kind of helps balance out my workload.
Right.
It's like a reason why most of the games I play are first-person shooters, because a lot of them just have online multiplayer that I can just jump into. I've been working on pages for 10 hours straight, and my brain is getting fried. I just jump into a few death matches in like Destiny or Call of Duty, and like I can check out super easy. I don't have to think about it at all. And that's my little break. And Skyrim is kind of the same way. It's like, jump in. What am I doing? I think to go there. I'll just walk there. Oh man, these mountains are really nice. This music's really calming. You can just do a bunch of domestic stuff. Like you can just ignore all of the campaign and still have a full game.
That's amazing.
So you can like, just live in this world, and I like it just for like that. I mean, it's purely just escapism, and I can do tasks if I want to. Whereas opposed to Horizon is entirely tasks, and it's the only game I've ever platinumed that I've ever 100%ed on the PlayStation my entire life. Because like I literally did everything, and I was like, there's nothing else. There's nothing. What the hell? And thank God there's DLC, because it's all I'm doing now. Like Horizon may be my favorite, but I think if we're talking about replayability, it's probably Skyrim.
Okay. That's a good answer. Now I'm gonna have to buy a PS4. So last question. As I mentioned, you likely spent a lot of time at the drawing table. You mentioned it yourself. I'm always curious as what people do while they're working. Like, are you a podcast person, or do you listen to music, movies? What's your pick?
Literally depends on the day of the week.
Okay.
I was in a hardcore podcast mood last week. I only listened to one podcast. It's it's a games news podcast called Kind of Funny Games Daily, and they release like a 1 hour podcast every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like the day's news kind of a thing. I mean, it's just a new show. And then I've also Jay Miles explaining X-Men. So sometimes I'll be in a hardcore podcast mood where I'll just listen to that for like 20 hours straight. But I think I'm in a TV mood right now. I just finished season 1 of The Strain. I finished Punisher. I'm rewatching season 2 of Daredevil. I think that's it for now. I'm probably going to do something. And then there's like the CW shows, Arrow, Flash, Super. So I do a bunch of TV because after the planning stage on pages of doing roughs, the rest of it is just manual labor.
Mm-hmm.
So once I know what needs to go on a page, I just sort of check out. Like drawing them is kind of a brainless activity for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I just turn everything off from then on, so I can listen to things with story. Ideally, it's something I've already seen because trying to follow along does take a little effort and kind of slows me down a little bit.
Right.
But for the entire stages, for like the 3 weeks that I'm penciling and inking, my brain's off. So just having a TV show or a movie that I can sort of just absorb into. Yeah, I mean, it depends what I'm in the mood for that day, whether it's TV, movies, music, podcasts. It always changes it, and I'll end up probably spending more time trying to figure out what I'm into that day than I would be on like actually working. Like it'll take me an hour. But it's like I try to podcast, like, no, I'm not into that. But like, what TV show? I got all these TV shows. Which one do I want? I'll just spend an hour looking at a list, just trying to figure it out until I don't know what I want. I don't want any of it. I just give up. I go do something else.
That's awesome. I love it. It is always interesting to hear people's responses to that question. Like, I think Scotty Young said that he watches people play video games on YouTube, which I thought was kind of awesome. Also because, like, this is really sad and it makes me sound old, but it's totally not the case. I didn't even realize that was really a thing that people did. I knew that people watched Twitch streams and stuff, but like he would actually watch like YouTube videos of people playing games. And I was like, that's awesome. I would love to watch somebody just play Final Fantasy like 7.
So I follow one guy. I've been following him for 6 years now, I think. His name is the Rad Brad. He's the only YouTube gamer I'll watch. He plays games, but like he doesn't. The thing I like about him is he doesn't make it about himself.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I find a lot of game YouTubers, well, you can see them or you can see their reactions. Like I don't want reactions. I just want to see you play the game, or at least not even see you. Like I want to see the game and controlling it. So he'll just do videos of that, and he'll like play it naturally. Like I find a lot of the YouTube gamers like they kind of overplay themselves a little bit, and he just plays it naturally, and it's hilarious because like I'll see him forget how to play a game, even though he's been doing it for his entire life. I'm like, how do you like? I'm watching like, how do you not know that like that next room is a boss room? Like it's so clear. And like he's just so nice about it. And he's like, all he does is just uploads gameplay footage. That's it.
Yeah.
Gameplay footage. And so that's my 5th option. If I'm just really in the mood, so I'll find a game I've always been interested in, but like I don't have time to really get into a new game that I've never done before. And I'll see he played it, so like I'll just watch that for as long as it takes to get until that's done. So that's my 5th one. Yeah.
That's great. All right, Kris, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for coming on and chatting. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, man. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Off Panel with artist Kris Anka. You can find him on Twitter at Christopher Anka, on Tumblr at christopheranka.tumblr.com, and his work in Runaways at Marvel. If you're a fan of the show, this is big news. Off Panel now has a Patreon. If you like the show and want to support it, consider backing it on Patreon at patreon.com/offpanel. There are fun rewards and insider information you can get if you do. Big thanks to all my existing patrons, including Andrew Scott, Brian McRae, Ira James Udaskin, Benjamin Birdie, Henning Allers, Modern Magic Stories, Nick Hall, Bruno Batista, Abraham Reisman, Adrian Diaz, Bobby Angus, Bjorn Basin, Darren Neely, John Hendrick, Steve Anderson, Michael Perlman, Bill Nall, Ian Maxfield, Cliff Chang, Benjamin Schipper, Colin McMahon, Chris Palmer, Maxwell Schmidt, Dan Lee, Scott McGovern, Nathan Fairbairn, Kat McKenzie, Lou Iovino, Christopher Carter, Nicholas Kesslake, Brian Dickerson, Greg Rucka, Ryan Mayle, Adam Highfield, Nicholas Gardner, Andrew Corrigan, Fiona Staples, Chris Morris, Johan Barander, Chris O'Halloran, Mark Abnett, Mike Murphy, Michael Shirley, Tom Barnett, Jim DiMonacos, Norbert, Nick Lowe, James Kaplan, and Mission Comics and Art in San Francisco. You guys are all the best. Don't forget to like the show on Facebook at /sketched, that's SKTCHD. Follow it on Twitter at @sketchcomic, or follow me at @slicefriedgold. Want more from Off Panel? Subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher and give the show a rating or review while you're at it. A quick thanks to the band Wolfpack, whose excellent track outro from the album Volmilch opens and closes the show now. Give them a listen as they're totally rad. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode.